What's up, my friends, and welcome into another edition of the Run It Back podcast, an emergency one that's so important that Frank and I decided that we were going to record a day early to make sure we got everything done in time. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Run It Back podcast. Tyler Zulli, Frank Klose with you, and we kind of had to scramble to get this thing together because it was necessary. The Phillies have fired Rob Thomson after 29 games in the 2026 season, 28 games, a 9-19 start to the year, one of the worst run differentials in baseball, one of the worst team ERAs in baseball, and a whole heck of a lot of other things that have gone wrong for this Phillies team. They have fired Rob Thomson. And Frank, I know yesterday you tweeted this out because we talked about it last week. You kind of had a timeline of 40 games. And after we found out yesterday that he wasn't fired yesterday, it felt like that might be kind of the timeline that this was going to be on. So I will start here, and then I'll let you expound on this. Not surprised entirely Rob Thomson was fired. Surprised that it happened today and not yesterday if it was going to happen.
Yeah, I'm surprised too. In fact, the Phillies took the step of sending to reporters, oh yeah, he'll be available for his usual pregame availability tomorrow. Like, why do that? I mean, were they that worried about speculation lasting in like a whole day during the day off? I'm really puzzled why they would do that. But yeah, Dave Dombrowski brought his top 3 advisors down to Atlanta, and everybody knew they were there. It wasn't like they were secretly checking in on the organization throughout. So, they were in the clubhouse. They were walking around the dugout. They were just that. By the way, that's a whole thing to talk about in itself. But that was, I guess, the sign that something could happen. And then yesterday, after that announcement, it was like, okay, well, maybe it's not today.
And I think the big thing that I've tried to separate today is players play. Managers tend to be the ones that fall on the sword. And both things can be true at once. The Phillies players, especially their veteran core, are pretty one-to-one responsible for the fact that this team is struggling to begin the year. We've talked about it plenty over the last couple of weeks. Lack of production with runners in scoring position, lack of depth from your starting rotation, lack of offense against left-handed pitching. The list goes on and on as to why they're 10 games under and have a minus 54 run differential less than 30 games into the season. Those things lead to coaches being fired just because you get the old adage, you can't fire the players more times than not. Now, obviously, we saw a Taijuan Walker release earlier this month. People have started to have the conversations about playing Alec Bohm less. I don't think that solves anything at the current juncture. But the picture being you can't fire the players tends to mean that a coach ends up losing their job. Now, I will say this. I think that I am a little bit surprised that it wasn't Kevin Long first. But I thought that meant Kevin Long in the offseason leading to Rob Thomson at the end of 2026. The timeline has been significantly different than what I initially anticipated.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, the Kevin Long situation, I do my mailbag on 97.3 ESPN. I had like 5 people ask since this morning, like, why not Kevin Long too? And I've seen plenty of respected people in the media ask, why not Kevin Long too? The only reason I can come up with is actually the same reason why Dave Dombrowski still gets a pass. It's their resume before all of this, right? I mean, Rob Thomson was a manager for the first time on the Phillies. Kevin Long, hey, he started out with the Yankees. He was there a long time, 8 seasons before he finally got fired, which is really long in baseball years, right? For a hitting coach to be with one team. New York Mets scooped him right up. He left on his own after that contract because he did not get the manager job and he wanted to land some other organization. So he wasn't fired from there. He goes to the Nationals, wins the World Series, not fired from there. The Phillies lure him away. So it's not like, and I think one of the questions I got was along the lines of, well, he's been at 4 teams. How come he's still around? Well, I think he's very, very respected. The Phillies just re-signed him to a 3-year deal in the offseason. The New York Mets would have loved to have him back, and so the Phillies kind of kept him away from the Mets. And I think that acknowledges a couple things, one of them being that the roster construction just isn't right. I mean, can Kevin Long do any more with Alec Bohm at this point? I mean, Alec Bohm has been streaky his whole career. Aside from one really good year where he had a longer stretch of success, he's been up and down throughout his career. Is Kevin Long going to magically make Bryson Stott hit against lefties? I don't know that he has the ability to do that. So, and then if you look at the cast of characters they've added this year, what can Kevin Long do with them? So, I think he gets a pass to help be part of this season to see if they can turn it around. But that might not be true at the end of the season. In fact, it might not be true about the general manager, or excuse me, the president of baseball operations at the end of the season. But yeah, I think what they needed more than anything was just that shakeup. If they had got rid of Kevin Long, if they had gotten rid of Rob Thomson, I think the effect would be the same. And that is the players looking at each other saying like, "Damn, we just got our guy fired."
Sure.
Because I think that especially the veterans on this team, the ones that have been around a long time, they really like Rob Thompson. They really like Kevin Long, and some of the, I would argue that the ties to Kevin Long are stronger, given that that Kevin Long is credited with fixing Kyle Schwarber and worked with Trey Turner and Bryce Harper. That's a lot of money that's tied into Kevin Long too. But I feel like the effect is the same. They just needed kind of a kind of an attitude in the clubhouse like, damn, we just did our guy dirty. And
And
so
I
I don't
think
think
that
you need to do that with more than one guy.
the timeline to me was kind of the weird part about it. As we said, like, I'm surprised. If it was going to happen, I did think it would happen yesterday. As you said, they kind of led on as if this was, business as usual, at least for the current moment. Going back to the offseason, my initial thought when Rob Thomson was extended to the 2027 contract extension, first of all, no manager. I'll never forget the scene in Moneyball when the A's manager says no manager likes to manage on a lame duck year.
Yep.
And I do believe that to be true. I think managers don't feel comfortable with 1 year on their contract. So the Phillies gave him a modest extension, gave him a little bit of hope. And I think for the Phillies side, what that allowed them to do was say, if things don't go the way that we want them to go, and I don't know what the outcome was that was, quote, want them to go. My guess, get to the World Series. I won't say win, but I'd say get to the World Series. My thought was Rob Thompson's probably managing his final year with the Phillies anyway. When you get to the idea that he's getting the extension, my thought was you either have to change up the core, not the core, but you have to change up the ideology of the roster, or you have to change the manager. They did neither of those things. So I was not
So they
I
ran
don't
it
think a
back.
firing was necessarily warranted, but I was surprised when they decided to bring him back. And now 29 games into the season, we have our second managerial firing less than 30 games into the year.
Yeah, I have issues with two things that Dave Dombrowski did this all season, and both of them are the psychological position he put his players in. One of them we've talked about at length. They flirted with Bo Bichette, essentially openly acknowledging that the roster they had wasn't good enough. And then what do you know? They bring back JT, they bring back Alec Boehm, and then it's like, oh yeah, business as usual, right? So one, that messed everybody up psychologically, in my opinion. I think that's part of this problem right now. Second was bringing Don Mattingly into this dugout as bench coach. It was an open acknowledgement. Well, yeah, our manager probably isn't good enough, so we're going to stick Don Mattingly here just in case, so that he can jump in case that there's a vacancy. Like it was in some ways unnecessary consternation, I think, at the top. So I
Interesting,
think
because
I
I was a big proponent of bringing him in just because I view it as having managerial experience as your bench coach. Now, granted, that works probably a little bit better for a younger manager than it does a veteran like Rob Thomson. But having a veteran to have a second voice, to have another, brain to pick, if you will, I look at that as a good thing. So I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Well, it's just that this is sort of almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It made everybody say, okay, well, look, Don Mattingly's there to take over, like once he starts to falter, and then, hey, 9-19 starts, still April, he's faltered enough that, oh yeah, here's Don Mattingly. So it kind of the fact that it played out exactly like the way a lot of people were alleging it would play out is just I think that just messes with the mind some. I mean, I don't have a problem with Don Mattingly being the interim manager. They announced it be till the end of the season, but I have no problem with that at all. But it's just the way it played out. It started out almost as an indictment of Rob Thomson, and that kind of carried into the season. So add that to the psychology of, yeah, your lineup's not good enough, or even Dave Dombrowski recently saying, oh yeah, we don't really have a number 4 hitter. Well, what do you think that?
No
I don't
doubt.
think that motivates everybody. Like back in the day, maybe it would motivate someone to say, "Oh yeah, I'll show him,"
Right.
but that's not how the game is today. So I just think a lot of these mistakes are in the psychology department. And yeah, I'm not a trained psychologist, but it's just my humble opinion.
So you bring up the wording of the Mattingly thing is intriguing because they say to the end of the season. Now, Mattingly has reportedly said he's not super interested in managing anymore. I think he liked being a bench coach, and I think it's, part of the reason, of course, working with his son, I'm sure, played a factor into it as well. Part of the reason he wanted to come here to be the bench coach. Now, I don't think you take a bench coach job with a manager who is teetering on the hot seat without knowing your name may get thrown into the ring once things go sour. But the wording being until the end of the season is probably what we've come to expect, but it makes me believe, based on the other report, that Alex Cora is not interested at this time to spend some time with his family. My guess would be this thing's going to play out as such. Rob Thomson gets fired. Don Mattingly is the interim manager. And at the beginning, sometime very, very early in the offseason for 2026, 2027, Alex Cora is hired as the Phillies' next manager.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on the Alex Cora thing. And well, the first is he is owed $13 million between now and the end of next year by the Red Sox. For the Phillies to make it worth his while, I don't know how much higher they can go than the $8 million a year that he was making. I mean, if you look, Dave Roberts with the Dodgers, Craig Counsell with the Cubs, like he was like the third highest paid manager, and they were all pretty much close, right? In terms of annual salary, he was almost at $8 million. He's going to get that no matter what. And then if the Phillies hired him, well, he wasn't going to get anything extra unless they paid him $10 million and then let the Red Sox off the hook. So I think in one respect, they would have to go a great length to really make him the manager. Maybe either overpay him for this year and next, or extend him a large number of years. So I think that's part of it for one. Two, the guy just got canned. He's probably like trying to figure out like how to take care of his kids again and figure out what he's going to do with his time. This is very, very fast. He might not be ready to make a decision on a dime. I think that's a genuine human thing. And then third, I think from a practical stance, Alex Cora gets to this offseason, he's going to have other opportunities. I mean, remember, he was bench coach of the Astros when they won the World Series. They may have a vacancy at the end of this year. The Astros are not having a good start either. Mm-hmm. So he gets to the end of this season. There could be some other options out there that might be just as appealing, or at the very least, he can use to negotiate a better deal, because next year the Red Sox are still paying him almost $8 million. So
yeah, I mean, you bring up the Astros now. They're 20 games over 500 in Joe Espada's time as the manager. They're 186 and 166. For that organization, it's funny to say this because you think back to the early 2010s when they intentionally kind of tanked. They were like the worst organization in baseball. For that organization to be 20 games over 500 in a manager's tenure, that's probably a low shoot for them. That's probably not a number that they're super in love with. And as you said, they are struggling. They're 11 and 18. They're in the conversation with the Mets and the Phillies as three of the most underperforming teams in baseball. I mean, if things continue to trend south for them, Espada's name is going to come up as probably the next manager on the hot seat. I'm not saying right away. They're not. I don't think they're as desperate as the Phillies were, and I don't think they're as desperate as Boston was. But I think Espada and Mendoza's names are going to be the next two that come up as managers that may not be managing their teams next year.
Yeah, by the way, Rob Thomson, a little bit more than 20 games over the 500 mark in his career, right? So 625 and 355 total in his managerial career. Excuse me, but the Phillies 355, 270. So
it's about 80 games over with the Phillies.
That's substantial. And yet in the years with the coach, he's way above that. So, but yeah, I mean, as we saw with Rob Thomson, I don't know that matters for Joe Espada, even though, even he was the bench coach that replaced Cora and then eventually gets the job. So definitely a worthy managerial candidate, even beyond. But you know what? but Alex Cora, it's just funny because I think that the Alex Cora firing kind of moved this along sooner.
Sure.
Because once the Boston Red Sox declare their sense of urgency, hey, look, the Phillies are worse off because not only is their record worse, but they just had lost a billion games in a row. It feels like, it creates an extra sense of urgency to make something happen in Philadelphia too, right? You don't see Boston do it and just think, okay, well, the Phillies can afford to be more patient.
Well, and I think, when it comes to Rob Thompson's tenure, sorry about that. Apparently, I don't know how to use my microphone. So with the Rob Thompson era, I think we will probably look back on this as a good era of baseball. Probably one of the better eras of Phillies baseball because let's be honest, the Phillies haven't had a whole lot of success in the franchise's history, right? They have a couple of odd pockets of World Series appearances in 15 and 50, and then that 75 or 76 through 83 team is probably the most for the first well-recognized run, and then they have their Rollins, Utley, Howard era, and then this era, the Bryce Harper era, is really the only really the third really good sustainable pocket of success. We mentioned Topper's 85 games over 500 as their manager. They won the division twice. They won 90-plus games twice. They went to the World Series in 2022. You take a step back and you strip yourself of how things ended, you're going to look on this favorably. At this very moment, we're probably a little bit more reactionary, a little bit more emotional, and say, well, you're 2-8 in your last 10 world postseason games. You're the Diamondbacks kind of carved out the pathway to beat you. The Mets took advantage of it. The Dodgers took advantage of it. And now you're 10 games under 500 in the one part of the season. Now, the largest part of the season, but the part of the season where you've thrived, which is we have better pitching than you, and we're going to win 90 games no matter how our offense ebbs and flows. You're 10 games under and you're minus 54 run differential. That's going to make people look upon this immediacy and say, yeah, it had to happen. And it probably did. We'll step away one day and say Rob Thomson had one of the best runs as a Phillies manager in the organization's history. But I also think we can understand the flaws that led to this moment, both within the organization and on the field, that caused this moment to happen.
So let's talk about then on the field then. What were the on the field types of issues that you can directly pin on Rob Thomson? Because it's very fair to say this roster is flawed.
Yep.
It's very, very fair to say, hey, some of these pitchers aren't showing up, and you can't necessarily control how rough a start Jesus Luzardo is going to have after his contract extension,
Sure.
right? So what can you actually pin on Rob Thomson right now?
Well, I'm a big believer in players play, right? So like on the field, the play itself is not Rob Thomson's doing. Rob Thomson has to put his players into the lineup every day. He pencils in the starters. He pencils in who's going to come into the out of the bullpen. He's going to pencil in who's going to pinch hit. He pencils in he probably pens in his platoons. And those things are Rob Thomson's doing because he himself has the decision making. But he can't factor into the fact that three of your four main right-handed hitters are abysmal this season against left-handed pitching. He can't factor in the fact that you can't hit with runners in scoring position. He can't factor in the fact that your starting pitchers are throwing the second most pitches per inning, and the only one that's worse is those aforementioned Astros that we just talked about. He can't factor in the fact that his bullpen has only thrown 30 less innings than his rotation has this year. That's not on him. Well, I mean, I guess that decision is because he's pulling pitchers, but he has his hands tied a lot. On the field, the only thing that you would pin on the manager is decision-making in individual situations and putting players into positions based on what your analytics tell you. That's not on him that they don't produce. I just think when it comes to this situation, when you say players play, managers tend to fall on swords.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard specific criticisms. I mean, maybe we can debate whether or not he should have brought a lefty in to face Michael Harris the second on Friday night. But like, I don't think there's any manager that we would agree with in every circumstance. But I still kind of think he's got that flawed roster, and he was his biggest strength always was being the communicator, keeping a calm demeanor. But is it just that they need a sense of urgency demeanor at this point? I mean, is that just something that he just doesn't do? I mean, this might not even be baseball related in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily like I use the phrase like kicking the pants. I don't know if it's necessarily trying to go from Joe Girardi, like militant man Joe Girardi, to laid back, calm, cool, collected Rob Thomson, because this is a veteran group. If you have a young group that responds to a manager firing to say, hey, we might our jobs may be on the line, because nothing's guaranteed when you're in your pre-arb and your arbitration contracts. Nothing's guaranteed. You could also get sent down. You have a veteran group here who I think understands that their jobs are not going to go away, especially the big time contracts. But as you said in the beginning, they probably should and do feel responsible for a guy losing his job. A guy who, by the way, has said he's probably going to hang it up once he's done when the Phillies say we don't want you anymore. That's probably it. I imagine they probably look at this and go, hey, we really like Rob. Rob's been a good clubhouse leader, great communicator, as you mentioned. We probably just cost him a year and a half of the final year and a half of his career. But I think that it's the unfortunate side effect of your team being bad, is that coaches tend to get fired.
Yeah, it's amazing too. Just again, looking at the records, winning percentages. I know he has one or two ahead of him with a small sample size, but I mean, he essentially has the best winning percentage of a Phillies manager.
I went out and pulled 400 games was the sample size that I used, and I think that's enough. That's over 2 seasons worth. Mm-hmm. There are 22 Phillies managers all time to have managed for at least 400 games. He has a .568 winning percentage. It's the best winning percentage of that group. And it's close-ish, but it's not like a percentage point or two. His is by far the best. He has 21 postseason wins. Only Charlie Manuel has more in the history of the organization. Now, again, different construct, because, for 100 years almost, it was like you win your division or you don't make the playoffs.
Yep.
But 21 playoff wins in 4 seasons is not a scoffable matter. So like all of those, and he's 10th in wins all time, no matter how many games a manager has managed. He has the 10th most wins in Phillies history. This is a good tenure that Rob Thomson and the Phillies put together. And also at the same time, it was probably time to put a new voice in place.
Yeah, that's the only thing I think you can do in a situation like this, is just simply find the voice. And it's unfortunate. I mean, there's always collateral damage when your baseball team doesn't win, and unfortunately, he's it.
So we were talking about kind of on the field stuff. The one thing that I wanted to point out was, we've talked a lot about this offense. Now, I don't know how you feel about the model numbers, the expected numbers, but I think they're good into tell a story. Like I said earlier today, if a guy's hitting 200 and his expected average is 300, I don't expect him to become a 300 hitter. But if a guy is hitting 240 and his expected average is 270, I think that tells a story of somebody that's maybe getting slightly unlucky. Maybe he's hitting the ball hard right at somebody. I went and looked at the Phillies as a team to try to figure out, are they getting unlucky? And the reality is, Frank, like, not really. Like, they're a little bit better on their expected numbers, but I went and pulled the expected averages and the expected slugs. And so the number that is highlighted has the Phillies as the 27th best slugging percentage in all of baseball. Only Boston, who, as you said, fired their manager, Milwaukee, who is struggling offensively, and New York, who may one day fire their manager, has coming. Worse slugging. What's that?
That's coming, I'm sure.
It might be soon, in itself. Those are the only 3 teams that are worse in terms of slug. If you look at the column over, that's expected slug. That's 386. And even if you take a look at that 386, it still only puts the Phillies at like 23rd in terms of expected slugging. You could do the same for average. They're 219 as a team. That's second last in all of baseball. The only team with a worse average than the Phillies as a team is the Cincinnati Reds at 213. If you go to the expected numbers, they're 23rd. It's 239. So yeah, they jump up 20 points in both categories, 20 in the average and 24 on the slug. but it still puts them in the bottom third offensively. So even if you were the biggest computer nerd in the world, like sabermetrics are your thing, advanced numbers are your thing, you live and die at expected numbers, your numbers would spit out that this is not a very good offense right now. And you pair that with all the pitching issues that we've discussed in terms of length of start and team ERA and starter ERA. This is just a bad baseball team right now. Like, there's really no other way to say it. And typically tends to happen. Bad teams fire their managers,
especially with payroll like that and with expectations like that. I mean, the shame of this is the semi-quincentennial. I think I finally get the habit of saying that correctly. But all eyes on Philadelphia this summer. All-star game in town. We don't want another 1996. I mean, God bless Ricky Batalico, but he was the only Philly in 1996 when the Veterans Stadium hosted the All-Star game. So you kind of wanted more out of this season, right? I mean, Philly's got the World Cup. I mean, this is a summer that's supposed to be all about the city of Philadelphia, and the fact that this is happening right now is particularly disappointing.
So it's actually interesting that you bring that up, because two things with the All-Star game. Typically, the host team, their manager gets invited to be like a special honorary coach, right?
Yeah.
What do you do now?
I guess it's Don Mattingly.
I guess Don Mattingly gets it, right? And then the other thing is, the Phillies might have representation at the All-Star game just because of name value. Like, Bryce Harper is going to get votes because people know who Bryce Harper is. Same with Kyle Schwarber. Maybe Trey Turner to a lesser extent. But right this moment, there's a chance the Phillies might just get their one obligatory All-Star. And if you ask me right this second, who would it be? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's Christopher Sanchez just because he got screwed out of it last year, but he was much better last year than he's been so far this year, at least numerically. Duran's hurt right now. He's on the IL. Maybe Harper does get in because he is swinging the bat fairly well, but like, the Phillies as the host organization might just have the one obligatory All-Star this year.
Well, I think it helps that Pete Alonso is no longer in the National League.
Sure.
I think Kyle Schwarber could easily get voted in. But I think this is going to be incumbent on the Phillies fans to really push those votes. We've seen it in the past. They can push up that number. I almost feel like they owe Chris Sanchez an All-Star appearance. So I think if he's in the range, he will be named. But yeah,
fans here are still upset that Jacob Mizorowski was named an All-Star.
It happens. Hey, you can always take a good fielding utility player now, right? Would they let him into a on? I don't know. But yeah, this is we'll see. I mean, look, it got late early, but it's still early. The Phillies, thanks to having 17 wild cards now, I mean, they're not technically out of it. I mean, but look, they need to. There's two ways they could have done this. When we were talking last week, I said, okay, get through San Fran at home, then you go to Miami for 3, then the Athletics, and then the Rockies. If you hadn't done it by then, that's when I thought they might make a decision. But of course, again, like I said, I think the Red Sox firing Cora kind of moved up the timeline. But I think this stretch coming up is going to be key. I mean, could they win some games between now and May 10th? When they conclude that Rocky series, they could.
Sure.
And I mean, getting back to 500 by the end of May is not out of the question. It's going to be some heavy lifting.
You're almost more aggressive than I. Like, I'm looking at it as, can you get to 500 by the end of June?
Yeah.
Because if you get there with 90 games or so left to play, then sure, you've got a shot. Because if you can be 40-40, which is a hard ask to go 31 and what is it, 31 and 21 the rest of the way, that's a tough ask for a team that's not playing well. But if you could be 40-40, then you're within striking distance.
And quite honestly, if you get to the deadline and you're 2 games over the 500 mark, you're very much in that wild card. So I would hope that then the Phillies would I guess go for it. I mean, they really don't have a choice other than to go for it, because I mean, they signed all these long-term contracts, I mean, that are just unmovable. So that's one thing about Bichette. Imagine if Bichette had signed to 7 years and he's off to the start for the Phillies, right? But there's little way to maneuver. So they're going to have some so for me, they have some tough decisions to make at the deadline if they're below 500. But I mean, I think they need to get to that 500 mark. They're very much in it, and then the deadline. I think I see. I think there's the standings up to the deadline, and then there's what happens after. I mean, the teams that really take off often don't do so until after you get into August. So they need to make some. They'll have to make some adjustments. But for me, they need to be teetering above the 500 mark for sure by that point.
So I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. So I apologize if I did. And again, there's a grain of salt with this because playoffs are vastly different than they were for most of the history of this game. There have only been 4 teams, according to Jeff Passan, in the history of baseball that have made the postseason after losing double-digit games in a row. And only 1 team in the history of the game that did it when they lost 10 in a row in April. The last team to do it, I believe it happened in 1950-something. History is working against this club. But the reality is there are 2 teams in the National League East with ridiculous payrolls that both have double-digit losing streaks. Now, one of 2 things are going to happen. Either history will be made and a 5th team makes the postseason, or 2 of the top 5 payrolls in all of baseball in the same division are both going to miss the playoffs. And for the Mets, it'll be the 2nd year in a row with that payroll that they've missed the playoffs. So either way, the storylines are going to write themselves.
Yeah, they sure will. And the Phillies, how will they and the Mets fare against each other? We'll see.
That's the thing. They've not played each other yet.
Battle of the basement. I don't know, but it's kind of crazy too. I mean, the way the schedule was set up, the fact that they went Chicago, Atlanta, that's a really rough stretch in itself.
Sure.
They should have won more. They should have won more, clearly. But I mean, and it's a shame that Chicago, they started this all off with that 13-7 win, of course, right?
Right.
So but just after that, it was just thud after thud after thud after thud, and just bad game after bad game after bad game. It just at least those are 12 tough games out of the way, no matter what, right? So, maybe other rosters have the opportunity to I want to say some easier pass. You can't take anything for granted, right? I mean, even in Colorado, a team you don't expect to do much, they did win one of the 3 games, right? But I mean, the Phillies are going to have to start sweeping some series.
Sure.
And I mean, that's what they're going to have to do to make up for the fact that they couldn't at least go 1-3. I mean, even going 1-3 instead of 0-4 in Chicago makes a big difference. I mean,
for
you
sure.
Look at the final numbers, right? So, I mean,
I think it takes a lot of the rhetoric out of it as well. Like
Yeah.
10, because 10 is it's a round number and it's such a large to lose 10 games in a row in the MLB. Because I always talk about the MLB as like losing 10 in the NBA. We see teams do it all the time. 10 in a row in the NFL is hard, but we've seen teams do it. Like the teams that win 2 games, right? They go 2-15 or whatever. They do it.
hey,
10 in the
Sunday.
NHL. The Flyers went back-to-back years where they lost 10 in a row and made the playoffs, and then won 10 in a row and missed the playoffs. To lose 10 in a row in Major League Baseball, you almost have to do it by accident because winning games in baseball is it's such a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is when you talk about that schedule, right? So they played 9 divisional games. They played 6 against the Braves and 3 against the Nationals in the month of April. They'll have 3 games against the Marlins in May. Those are their only 12 division games before the calendar flips to June. They don't then play another divisional team until they play the Marlins on June 15th. They then play every single game from June 15th to June 28th is a division game. 2 series against the Nationals, a series against the Mets, and a series against the Marlins. If you're looking for a bright spot, assuming you play well in those series, which is not a guarantee with the way that this team is playing, but assuming you play well, you can make up divisional games quickly in the month of June.
Yeah, I mean, this is a freak of a schedule, and then I'm looking at the end of the calendar for September. That's when you usually face some division rivals again. I mean, they're going to have 6 against Atlanta in September. This is crazy. They really have concentrated these Atlanta games at 2 ends of the schedule, which is really bizarre. But they'll have 2 against the Nats and 4 against the Mets. So at the end, that if they're hot towards the end, then they can really make some of it count. I mean, hey, look, 2007, 2008, the Phillies came way back in the NL East and took advantage of those end of the year series. could they do it again? Again, if they're positioned to do it. But I mean, how much roster tinkering can they? Yeah, I mean, to me, they have to do something about the roster. I don't know what it is. I mean, do you take a shot of Tommy Pham just because he's out there? And I think he was just released. I mean, that's. I mean, how long does Dylan Moore have to be on the roster before he gets a hit? I mean, you know, I don't know what to do. I mean, like there's just they don't have options internally. They felt they didn't have to add anybody to this, but I don't know. I mean, one thing I said the other day was, you know, if the Red Sox are feeling equally awful, I mean, do you try to build a deal around like Durbin for Bohm or something? I mean, I realize that that's not an equal transaction. You probably have to build it out with more players, but do you try to get some change for change's sake and try to do some change of scenery moves early in the season that maybe will help both teams?
It's April 28th, and we're playing what ifs and hypotheticals that really grasp at straws. Did not expect to be here this early.
But other people are in that spot too. I mean,
sure.
You know, the Red Sox to me are a good trade partner just for mixing up sake, because they probably feel the same way.
I think that it is a situation where, as you said, what was it, last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, the reality is we're probably not going to see something happen for at least another few weeks. You know, obviously the big move today, of course, Rob Thomson gets fired, but roster construction wise, there's too many playoff spots now. Too many teams think that they can compete. They're not going to give away talent if they don't believe that they're, you know, not in it. So unless you find a handful of teams, of which right now the Phillies are one of, that are really, really far deep in the standings, I don't think a lot gets done. So the reality is we're probably having these conversations and then looking towards late May, early June before anything of substance happens.
Yeah, and how much can they ride this out? I mean, it's a really tough ask. I mean, even some of the teams that you might traditionally look to be out of it at this time. I mean, look, the Pirates are 3 games above the 500 mark. They're doing pretty well so far.
Pitching's been great.
Yeah. I mean, you know, any team with Paul Skeens is, if you can add some pieces behind Paul Skeens, you know, you're going to be all right. But even some of the teams, I mean, the Rockies, usually they were really bad last year, but they're only 3 games under the 500 mark at this point, right? So who are you looking to sell? I mean, the Angels, I don't know, they're 6 games under 500. Will they make a trade? But I mean, again, this is all. I mean, unless you do Astros, again, another team that might be looking for some change of scenery. There's just nothing to happen. Every once in a while, you'll be surprised, right? Again, you mentioned Moneyball earlier. They made reference to the John Mabry for Jeremy Giambi trade. Just kind of shook things up in the Athletics clubhouse, making that deal with the Phillies. That was early and shocking, but I don't know if teams make those types of trades right now.
Sure. Again, as we said, with the expansion of the postseason, it's hard to justify that. I got to be honest with you. I'm tired of complaining. So I think we wrap it up for the day.
That sounds good to me.
So big thanks to everybody who checked us out. Thanks for joining us early today. Obviously, the big breaking news: Rob Thomson fired after a 9-19 start, the second manager this year to be fired. Probably more to come, the way that we've discussed it, but we'll see when that happens. Don Mattingly takes over as the Phillies interim manager for the remainder of the season. So for Frank Klose, I'm Tyler Zulli saying thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you've not already, hit that subscribe button on your way out, smash the like button, and of course, leave a 5-star review if you're listening on any of our audio-only platforms. We'll be back next week for the latest edition of the Run It Back podcast. So for Frank, I'm Tyler Zulli saying thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week. See you.